Hi, I'm Bicasso, and this is my 2022 wrecked Indian Chic Dark Horse. I just got this bike from the auction, and today we're gonna go over, I guess, some of the things that appear to be, I guess, scuffed up or messed up on this bike to determine what needs to be fixed or what can be salvaged or what needs to be replaced. So let's get right into it. For starters, this bike came from the Copart auction, and we had trouble getting this bike in the garage because the front suspension is completely torn apart, the rim is broken, and essentially the bike doesn't roll. But we were able to get the bike in neutral, which allowed us to put it on a wheel dolly, and we were able to essentially put the wheel dolly on the front wheel, and we were able to roll it into the garage. Looking at this front end, clearly there's a lot to digest here. The outer fork or the inner fork of this needs to be completely replaced, but I'm hoping that a lot of the internal components like the spring and the spacers, they're not too bad bent, and really the worst case scenario is that I just have to replace this outer piece. Also, the lower part of the forks are really scuffed up, and the triple tree's messed up, and also the lower triple tree is messed up. The thing about the triple tree that you can't really see, or at least the lower one, is that you have this turning lock right here, basically preventing the forks from going too far to the right. And what you couldn't see is that the one on the left has actually been sheared off. So this lower triple tree more than likely is going to have to be completely replaced, outside of it probably being bent. But the one on the top, it could possibly be salvaged if it's not warped any. We can get this sand it down and get it possibly bondoed and basically get this repainted, and it could come out really nice depending on what I want to do with it. The risers hold the handlebars on the bike. These are actually possibly okay, just get them sanded down and repainted, but if they're not bent, they can be reused. There's a bracket that sits on top of this as well that is not on the bike. I would have to get another one of those. And what happens is the bracket holds the handlebars, which are completely snapped in half right here. They're not usable. Also, the ride command, the device that shows the speed, the navigation, and all that comes with this bike, it sits in that little cradle, and it's not on the bike as well. So down here, again, we got the handlebars, we got the right control right here, it has the cruise control on it. This can probably be salvaged. It doesn't look too beat up. Oh wow, look at this mirror. Wow, that is completely shattered. That is, wow, interesting. We also have the left handlebar control right here. This one looks far worse. The real important thing here is that the internal components of this are salvageable. These buttons can be replaced as well, so that's not too big of a deal. We got brake lines that are messed up. This piece I know alone is like $300. This perch that holds the clutch handle. This clutch, yeah, the clutch side. This is like $300 by itself. Brake reservoir, looks like it's salvageable. Looks like that's just like some kind of dirt or something that can be fixed as well, or painted and redone. Coming over here to the right side of the bike, the rotor surprisingly looks okay. This lower fork is scratched up. I might actually try to save this one because there's one big scuff on here that can probably be, we can probably have this sandblasted and maybe repaint it or powder coat it. I'm not sure yet, but this fender, I was able to reshape a fender on my first Indian Chic that I had. It was nowhere near as warped as this, but worst case, I just have to get this replaced, and I can actually use this one to test out how to reshape a fender. But you can see on the back, this is actually scrubbing the tire. So we got that contact point right there, and this contact point right here, which is preventing the front wheel from turning. Have I scared you off yet? It gets a lot worse. We're just getting started. Under the bike, you got the rectifier, you got the oil filter, the starter. All of that actually looks fine. Then you have on this side, you got the brake the rear brake, the rear master cylinder. This looks okay. You can tell it took a little hit right there. I don't know if it's actually, so yeah, that's actually leaking right there. You can see that. But that line runs all the way under the bike to the ABS module, so it wouldn't be replacing, like, it'll just be replacing that line to the ABS module. Then we got the ignition cover. Looks okay, scuffed up. Cam cover, that can be repainted. Cam cover looks okay. Obviously this saved the cam cover. We got rear turn signals right here. This is the license plate bracket that they zip tied to this to keep it from, I guess, being lost from the bike. Clutch cable surprisingly doesn't look as bad as I thought it would. That cover, that may actually be able to be reused. I'm not sure, or at least for testing purposes. The heads actually have a few scuffs, I'm guessing from this stuff rubbing up against it. That can be taken off and easily repainted. The headers, the heat shield rather, that heat shield is loose. It is bent right there. The one in the front looks a lot better than the one in the back. These are actually connected right here. So this one's separate from this main piece, and that piece right there is connected to this. So these two pieces are connected to here. And they can be disconnected, but you can see how it's kind of pulled away from the bike. And then that comes to this exhaust bracket right here, which is actually snapped in half. This is mounted to the frame of the bike. I don't know what I'm gonna do with that yet, because this actually has a stage 1 exhaust on it and the stage 1 air filter. And that stage 1 exhaust is like $900, but if I'm going with another exhaust, I won't need that, and more than likely I won't need this either if I have a single 2-in-1 exhaust. So we'll just have to figure that out. Suspension surprisingly looks okay. The first Indian Chief that I had, the left suspension strut was completely bent. We were able to salvage that. We were able to salvage the spring, but the damper inside was bent. That one appears to be okay. The one on the left side also appears to be okay. This rear fender is definitely scuffed up. It can be fixed depending on how bad it's warped. I don't know how bad it is warped because the rear end is twisted. I'm thinking that the swing arm has been twisted a bit, and the reason I say that is because we see the sprocket, we see the belt, that looks okay, but when you actually go touch the tension on the belt, that is not supposed to be that loose. So something somewhere, either that swing arm is twisted, causing that belt not to be fully seated on the pulley, but something there is kind of not correct. So we're gonna have to take that off. Worst case, we just change out the swing arm. I don't think the frame has been compromised, but you can see how that suspension strut is kind of twisted right there because of the swing arm. So I'm hoping it's just the swing arm and not the frame itself. Side covers are good on both sides, which is good news. Turn signals on the front are completely busted. This headlight assembly is completely busted, but good news is, you see this sheared wire, this goes to the signal light, the left turn signal, but this is the stock wiring harness, and I'm glad to see that this is completely intact. So this feeds through here and out through the neck of the bike, because this can be taken off and replaced pretty easily. I think I can salvage some of these bolts off of here that have not been broken off. But like I said, the good news is this is one of the most important pieces without having to, either repin it or get an entirely new wiring harness because it was sheared off. So that is very good. On this side, we got the speedometer connector right here, aka the rod command. That is good to see that is still somewhat intact. This little gray piece right here, I've replaced this before, literally only like $1, not that big of a deal. These wires right here, this goes to the handlebar harness. We can get a new handlebar harness pretty easily. More than likely, when we get a new set of handlebars, it will come with a new set of wire harness. This USB cable goes into the back of the rod command. Damn, mosquito, Jesus Christ. This piece right here goes into the back of the rod command. This gives us GPS navigation. This is a really handy thing. I've actually replaced one of these before. It was sheared off on the other bike, and I basically re-tipped this. I have spare blue connectors just like this. Here's the other end of that. Looks really good. This is the stage 1 air filter. I am kind of hurt to see this is scuffed up. I will probably not replace this because this thing's like $500 and it's just scuffed up. Let me know what y'all think about that. But yeah, I really like this. I don't want to replace it just because it's scuffed up. What's interesting is that on this bike, there's a lot of wrecked pieces or broken pieces that weren't broken on the first bike. Like the tank wasn't messed up on this bike, but it was on the first bike, like really bad. On this bike, the suspension isn't messed up. On the first bike, the suspension was messed up. On the first bike, the exhaust was not messed up, but on this bike it is. Yeah, there's a lot of different things between these bikes that are messed up and not messed up. So again, that just makes all of this fun. I'm actually really surprised that this gas tank did not get too many dents. On the first bike, this entire part of this tank was pushed in from a dent from the wreck. But on this one, we got away with roughly just some, you know, quarter-sized dents that can be pulled out with a slide rail. Not that big of a deal. This cover piece right here is dented. That can be hammered back out. We've had one of these repolished and painted before. This gas cap can be replaced easily. This tank actually is not mounted. We can easily just take this off, and we're gonna actually get a look at the middle of the frame right here. But one of the worst parts of this bike, outside of the frame, the weird, you know, steering column stuff like that, and the steering stock, is that there is an oil leak on this bike, and I've called myself kind of finding out where the problem is. So under here, there is a frame rail that is pushed in. It is dented, but this frame rail is replaceable without having to replace the whole frame. This piece right here, it comes down right here, it disconnects from here, and it disconnects at the back end. So this whole rail can come out, and this is how you remove the motor. But there is a leak where one of these bolts that puts this frame rail onto the rest of the bike, it is broken off into the motor. So more than likely, we're gonna have to tap and extract that screw out, and that is the source of the oil leak. I extracted my first bolts from a motorcycle frame on the first Chief, and it went perfectly fine. So this time we got extracted from the crankcase on a motor. So we're gonna have to be very careful with doing that, but once we do this, we should be able to get a new bolt, get a new frame rail, and put that back in, and hopefully that should stop that oil leak. But I don't have any reason to believe that there's motor damage or anything. Mostly when bikes are wrecked, they're kind of stopped right then and there. So even though this bike has been leaking oil, I don't think it was actively running, which would damage the motor. But either way, we still don't know, but there's a good chance that it's perfectly fine. But you can see that even though we're having some belt issues right here, you can see how it's rubbing. This is rubbing on here, but that belt is definitely not where it needs to be. The bike is in neutral, so we are able to, you know, shift it through the gears, and the gearbox appears to be okay. Alright, after getting that off, that gives us a look at the cell modem that controls the GPS components. This is also the VCM. This controls things like the heated grips, the headlight functionality, and also we got the battery under here, which looks to be still possibly powered on. That's going to be interesting if it is. Maybe it's not, we'll find out later. But this is the WCM. This is what I was referring to in the first video, that we can actually possibly swap with this bike, because we do have the ride command and a key fob for this bike because it does power on. And we were able to see the mileage on this bike, and we could take that same equipment and put on here and possibly get this bike at least turned on to see any information about the bike. But the good news also is that this subframe looks to be true. You can see it in alignment with the frame right here. On the first Chief, this was actually warped. But you can see also how possibly the swing arm is bent right here. So that's going to be interesting to take off and find out what's going on with that. Get this tank off. There's nothing really holding this on here. All right. Now that we got the tank off, we can see that we got 2 mounts right here for the tank that are still intact. The 2 up here at the front are not here, so we got to get new mounts for the tank. Once you get that off, the bike actually does not look as bad as it did before. Look, it's already turning out to be a better bike, or a better looking bike. And once we get that front end off, it's gonna look even better. And also once we get the headers off, so we're already off to a really good start. And just to take another look at this frame, you can kind of see it from the front. We are leaning a little bit on this jack. It is looking to be just fine, which is good news. I'm also curious, now knowing that we have a stage 1 exhaust, stage 1 air filter, if we have enlarged injectors, and also do we have the rest of the stage 2 setup, which gives us bigger or better cams, and also a bigger throttle body. But we won't know that until we start tearing more into the bike. But everything up here looks exactly as it should be. Like this is the fuel pump connector, which is still intact. I do see that the fuel line has been sheared off right there. We're gonna need a new fuel line. Actually, you see this right here? This is actually the fuel line. So we're gonna need a new one of those. Let's put that back. And also the fuel vent line is right here. Turning this tank upside down for a brief moment, you can see where the fuel line was sheared off right there. Also, that is the fuel vent line right there. That's interesting. Oh no, look at that. That is actually the electronic connector for the fuel pump. That's not good. That is something that we couldn't see before. I'm gonna have to take that off and see if that can be fixed. If not, we're gonna need a new fuel pump. That is something you just cannot see when you're taking bikes apart, or when you're getting wrecked bikes. Also, this piece right here, that the rear mount right there, you see is bent. That's gonna have to be just bent back in shape. And also, these are actually the front mounts, and you can see how they were still, I guess, screwed in, which is why the those rubber mounts were taken off. So yeah, again, this is just something you don't see when you're looking at pictures. Just by looking at this bike, that is where we are. I'm actually not too afraid of it at this point. Yeah, I was actually kind of afraid of it at first when I saw it pull up at my driveway. But that is the thing with wrecked bikes, is that the more you dig into them, there's always something else that needs to be fixed. And to me, that is part of the fun, is figuring out what's messed up, what can be replaced, what can be salvaged. And you know, it's all about figuring out some things as you go along. There's nothing wrong with that. But if you didn't know, I'm already giving away a rebuilt Chief. For those of you that have already entered, thank you, because you helped me be able to do this. But if you want to get in on that, you can head over to BrandonBicasso.com by clicking this little tab right here on the screen. It'll take you right to it. And also, if you want to catch up on that series for that Chief, you can click right here and see that as well. But as always, thanks for listening to my story. Next up is that Chief right there. And if you're subscribed, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.